Hello, my name is Mark, and like all middle-aged men with beards and record collections and glasses, I have myself either a YouTube channel or a podcast, depending on your point of view, because what the world needs is more podcasts. Today is Thursday, 24th of July, 2025, and I generally, about once a week, talk about records I own, like, love, or just have. And I think the past few weeks have been probably quite difficult if you work in various industries. On the 11th of June, Doug McCarthy from the not as well known as I would like them to be industrial band Nights of Ebb died. And that was just before I went on tour for about 9 days, seeing a lot of bands. And so I didn't do an episode about that. But that was unexpected. On Tuesday, the Prince of Darkness, the Ozzman, Ozzy Osbourne, Passeth. And that's going to be most of what I'm going to be talking about today. But also I'm going to remind you what Voltaire said, not Cabaret Voltaire, Voltaire, which he said, "To the living one owes respect, to the dead only the truth." And today, Hulk Hogan's death was also announced. Hulk Hogan was a union-busting, philandering, right-wing mega-trumper, and also had the most ridiculous mutton chops, or more correctly, the most ridiculous facial hair in the world, even more ridiculous than mine. And I think one of the best things about humanity is that when somebody dies, they say how they really feel. And not that many people appear to be heartbroken about Hulk Hogan because of who he was and how he treated his fellow humans. And that is the thing that people remember when you die. People remember how you made them feel. And a lot of people felt Hulk was a bit of a wanker. So sorry if you're a huge WWE fan. Let us not forget that the last time Hulk appeared in public, he was booed off stage. And sometimes you have to listen to the people, especially if you think of fame as a popularity contest. Earlier on this week, on Tuesday, the death of Ozzy Osbourne, but one of Birmingham's favourite sons, apart from me, was announced. And I have thoughts about this. Now, first and foremost, in case you don't know, I am from Birmingham. I grew up in Birmingham in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. So I grew up in the streets and grew up in the town that Black Sabbath came from. I think Birmingham as a town has never been particularly good at advertising what it's brought to the world. And by the way, Birmingham has brought a lot to the world. One of the many things it has also brought to the world has been some amazing bands. It's brought Judas Priest, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Napalm Death, perhaps lesser lights like UB40, but it's also brought to the world Duran Duran, the Dexys Midnight Runners, ELO, The Streets, Broadcast, Electribe 101, and Fuzzbox. And so I think that Birmingham, and it's only really in the past 15 years, Birmingham as a town has really started to be proud of its legacy. You can think about some other cities that have basically made their roles or made the core part of their identity with the bands that they have made. There are professional Mancunians right now who have made their sole purpose of existence to be proud of their own achievements. And people from Birmingham, they're not always so big-headed, actually. They don't always advertise it. And so, for example, it was only in 2011 when Birmingham had the short-lived Museum of British Heavy Metal that existed at the Town Hall that Birmingham started to turn the corner a little bit in terms of being proud of its achievements. And obviously, I mean, I spent a lot of time in rock and metal pubs and clubs in Birmingham in the late 80s and the 90s. Places like XL's, Costermongers, Edwards Number 8, and I think Exposure Rock Cafe, which was never particularly good. And to be fair, Blaze Bailey from Iron Maiden did say that XL's, which has now been demolished, was his favourite building in the world. To be fair, it wasn't my favourite building in the world, but it's probably in my top 7, I think. Yeah. And there were times when I'd be walking around Birmingham and you'd see, Tony Iommi or Geezer Butler, for example, walking about, minding their own business, doing their own thing. And, I'd see Geezer and it was like somebody had made an action figure of my dad and turned it into a hard rocker. And you just go, this guy from Black Sabbath. And I want to explain why I think as well that I'm not a huge fan of Ozzy. And for this, I have to do a little bit of embarrassment, actually. So I have to move something and I have to bring something to your attention. So as a 15, 16-year-old, my first exposure to Ozzy Osbourne in any way, apart from being the geezer that sang on the Black Sabbath records, was in this film, The Decline of Western Civilization, Part 2, The Metal Years. This is a fabulous Blu-ray box set of The Decline of Western Civilization, Part 1, Punk, Part 2, Rock and Metal, and Part 3, the grunge hardcore years. And there was a formative night of British television, which is called Heavy Metal Heaven on BBC Two, about February 1989 or so. I should know the date, and it was hosted by Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And there was a broadcast of live footage of Slayer, half an hour at Hammersmith, Metallica, half an hour at Hammersmith, The Decline of Western Civilization, I think Led Zeppelin in Holland, and a bit of Napalm Death live at a pub called something like, the Docker's Fist in London. And Ozzy Osbourne appeared in this. I've got to be blunt. I was watching that footage and I was kind of going, that's the guy that fronted Black Sabbath? This guy? And at that point, Ozzy was deep in the depths of alcoholism. So you've got footage of him cooking bacon, shambling, stumbling, his hand shaking, possibly going through the DTs, wearing a bright kind of velvet, kind of leopard skin dressing gown. And I was just like, that guy's not, he's a clown. He's a shambling clown. And that's why, for many years, and I hold this completely on my hands, is I had no interest whatsoever in Ozzy at all. Black Sabbath, I heard bits of, loved bits of. But Ozzy, I was like, I don't get it. I'm like, really? No, I don't. I didn't get it at all. And obviously it's only when you see and hear the records that you get an understanding of the huge role that Black Sabbath had. Obviously his death was not unexpected. 17 days before his death, he obviously played his final show, the Back to the Beginning show at Villa Park in Birmingham. We tried to get tickets. We failed, thanks to the vagaries of Ticketmaster. But, 17 days before his death, he played his last show headlining the football stadium in the suburb where he grew up, the stadium he dreamed of playing football in and ended up playing rock in. And there is a thing that's well known. Effectively, it's called like leisure sickness, a concept where when the task is done and complete and you finish the work, is that you either get poorly or you die not long afterwards. And there's lots of examples of this. David Bowie released Black Star 4 days before he died. Stanley Kubrick finished the final edit of Eyes Wide Shut 6 days before he died. Motorhead played their last show less than 3 weeks before Lemmy died of cancer. Tom Petty died 2 weeks after his last show. Ozzy died 17 days after his last show. And sometimes, and as Ozzy said, I don't know anything else. I'll retire when they put the fucking nail on the lid, is what he said. And that is true. Sometimes you are born to do one thing, and that is the thing that you do. And when you stop doing it, you die. And then there's obviously that cliche, do you get old because you stop dreaming, or do you stop dreaming because you get old? It's the same thing. It's like when you've rocked your last roll, is that the thing that's going to hasten your demise? And I've seen a number of artists who are older than Ozzy now ever was, playing live, mostly people in Pink Floyd, all of whom are like either 79 or in their 80s now. And there's an element of doing that thing adds years onto your life. So I think for Birmingham, and this is true of Oz and Black Sabbath, is that they were never cool until recently, but they were always sincere. They always were an authentic representation of who they were and what they believed. And that's really, really important, because if you're making music, why, if you are effectively occupying space in that rarefied atmosphere where only a few people get to make a living out of it, why you pretend to be anything other than what you are? And if what you are is a fantastically heavy blues rock band called Black Sabbath, don't try to be anything you aren't. Live that ability to have complete creative and artistic integrity as much as you possibly can. And rightly or wrongly, Black Sabbath did that, even throughout their many, many lineups, when they were fronted by a different guy every week, and they had a different drummer every 2 weeks, and they were doing albums like Born Again, Seventh Star, and things like that. Not my favourite period. Remember, when I was 16 in 1989, when Headless Cross by Black Sabbath came out, and I was like, I don't understand why this band are absolutely huge. But at that point, I hadn't heard the music on this. I hadn't heard the 70s music. I knew Paranoid, War Pigs. I sang Paranoid in a band that I was in briefly in about 1990. And I was okay at it. Ozzy was certainly better. But like every band, everywhere in the world, you have to do Paranoid at least once. Even Jarvis Cocker has covered Paranoid, which gives you an idea of how deep it goes. And I think the first thing I will say about Black Sabbath, and this will sound a little bit kind of possibly heretical, is I'm not actually an Ozzy fan. I'm a fan of the music that was made by Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Ozzy was the voice, and therefore he was almost like the lightning rod that conducted the band. But if I think about the thing in Black Sabbath that made me go, that's it. It's the music. It's that detuned, heavy, weird riffing that Tony Iommi brought to the band that didn't sound like anybody else. It was that rhythmic bass that you got from Geezer. And most of all, and most importantly, and I still firmly believe this, no Bill, no Black Sabbath, is the drumming on the Black Sabbath albums is phenomenal. You can listen to Bill's drumming, and if you took away all the other instruments, it would sound like a fantastic jazz drummer from the 50s. That drumming is incredible. The punctuation that he has, the speed that he has, the fills, the punctuation. Because if you don't have a good drummer, every band sounds like this all the time. It's all monotone and in one direction and at one sound, and it just keeps going, and there is no definition whatsoever. Whereas, if you have a great drummer, the band can keep going and going and going, and the punctuation adds to the drama, and it makes it better. It makes it worse. It adds the rhythm, the tempo. The bass is great, but the drumming is where it's at. So no Bill, no Black Sabbath. That's my one thing. And so, what a wonderful way to end a life with headlining the football stadium round the corner from where you grew up. And I'm really glad I got to see Ozzy twice solo in London in 2005 and Folkestone in 2010, which was one of his, I think possibly his smallest UK gig for a long time. And then also to see Black Sabbath twice, once at Alexandra Palace in 2005 with Bill on drums, and once in 2014 at London's Hyde Park on the 13 era tour, supported by Motorhead, Soulfly, Soundgarden and Faith No More. And obviously of those bands, 2 of the singers were dead within 1,050 days, and 4 of the bands had split up within 3 years of that show. Obviously Motorhead, Faith No More, Soundgarden and Black Sabbath had all come to an end less than 3 years after that show. And what an incredible show it was. No Bill, no Black Sabbath though. So I'm going to talk a little bit around the Black Sabbath discography, and just give you some thoughts upon that, because I'm not the world's biggest Black Sabbath fan. I don't have every coloured vinyl version or anything like that. I started off by buying the complete replica 70s CD collection, which I think you can get for about £50 if you know where to look. I paid £30 for mine because there was a crease on the box somewhere there, which I thought was worth taking 20 quid off. And this is mini CD replicas of the studio albums recorded with Ozzy. It's the same masters, by the way, as the 2004 black box. So if you're one of these people that's really into mastering, hello people from the Steve Hoffman forums, then I don't have an opinion about that. I have an opinion about, does the music move me? Does it mean something to me? And in here you have, I think, the 8 studio albums recorded with Ozzy in his first life, or mostly, if not all, in gatefold sleeves. So you've got the Black Sabbath album here with the gatefold sleeve, the upside down cross and the poem, which the band weren't too happy about. You've got your Paranoid here, again with a gatefold sleeve with a picture replicating. If there was an inner sleeve, that's what it was replicating, by the way. You have Master of Reality, and aside from the fact that these have the barcodes on, they replicate the originals. Volume 4 in a gatefold CD sleeve. By the way, if you heard that noise, that's a 15-year-old who I think is playing FIFA with his friends. And features, photos of the band live. You then have Sabbath Bloody Sabbath from 1973. I'm not so sure about the gatefold picture on that. You have Sabotage, again, not so sure about the front picture on that either. Technical Ecstasy, and finally 1978's Never Say Die. It's a good set, by the way. It's probably one of the best ones to pick up if you want to get everything by the Sabs, at least in studio form. There is one album from this period that is missing. It was released in 1980. It is the semi-official Live at Last album. And I have to remember where I have put Live at Last, because it was released with the permission of the band's former manager, who sold the rights for a reissue series. The Live at Last, controversially, is the only Sabbath album released for a very long time, with the classic 1970 to 1978 Ozzy era Black Sabbath live album that was released for a very long time indeed. And it features recordings from Manchester in 1973 and London from 1973. If you do absolutely positively need to get a Black Sabbath live album, that's a good one. But personally, I'd recommend going for Past Lives. There's a 2 CD version of it that features additional tracks recorded, I think, at New Jersey in 1975 and Brussels in 1970. All of those shows are available in fuller forms on other reissues, by the way. Going through the band's discography, which I will do now. The first album, Black Sabbath, has not had one of those super fancy 4 CD editions. The best version of this to get if you're into all your extended and additional tracks is to go for the 2009, sorry, I need to correct that, the 2009 2 CD edition that features a whole bunch of extra studio tracks, outtakes, and a booklet and a new mastering. If you are a fan of the band, by the way, there is one missing track from their discography. It was on the American edition of the album. It wasn't on the UK edition of the album. It's called Wicked World. It's on the B-side of the single to Evil Woman. And if you don't have Evil Woman as a single, Wicked World is also on We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll, the 1974 compilation album. At least I think it's 1974. Wicked World, sorry, it is track 4, side 2, the only studio track released during Ozzy's time that didn't, I think, make it onto an album. I could be wrong. If I am wrong, of course, I'm sure somebody will tell me. And here's a really embarrassing photograph of a woman in a coffin on the inside of it. I love heavy metal. I don't like their covers. I really don't. And of course, We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. A bit influential on the Spinal Tap there. If you're a real fan of live stuff, you can go for this recording, which is called Black Mass, but is also available in other forms. It features the only live version of Blue Suede Shoes that I've heard, that was recorded at the same time. The second studio album, Paranoid, has been released a number of times. Here is the 2009 3-disc version that features the album itself, the quadraphonic mix on a second disc, which I think is a DVD, and then on the third disc, studio outtakes and extra tracks, which is fascinating to hear. If you're the kind of guy that goes into the alternate takes, yes, I am. Master of Reality, the third album, has a 2 CD edition here. And I don't think there is any additional version of Master of Reality apart from this. I should point out, by the way, that in around about 2016 to 2023, Black Sabbath albums came out, most of them in expanded multi-disc versions. Paranoid has a 4-disc version that includes, I think, Live at Montreux and Live at Brussels, as well as studio outtakes and extra tracks. Master of Reality only has 2 CDs in the 2009 edition here. There's lots of extras on here. Sweet Leaf, After Forever, Children of the Grave, stuff like that. There is, for volume 4, there is a 2021 4 CD version, which includes extra live songs. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath has no expanded editions yet at all. Sabotage has a 4 CD edition featuring some of the shows that also feature on past lives. Technical Ecstasy has a 4 CD version that was released in 2021. Never Say Die, the last studio album recorded by the 4 classic members, has no expanded edition whatsoever. But if you are keen on getting 1978 era live material, probably the best thing to go for is this obscurity, Never Say Die. Black Sabbath, an hour, recorded live at London's Hammersmith Odeon in 1978. And it is embryonic in so much as it is a raw, loud, warts and all performance. It's an hour of Black Sabbath live in 1978. And it's really bloody good. Really bloody good. But of course, if you've made it this far into the video, you'll know how good Black Sabbath are, because you will have switched off about 10 minutes ago, if not sooner, looking at my average view count. There's lots and lots of bootlegs of Black Sabbath that are doing the rounds. This one is particularly good. This is One for the Nose. It's a recording from the Fresno Arena in 1978, during the last tour that they did with Ozzy and Bill, in the original lifespan of the band. And then Ozzy left the band on a permanent basis. So let's go into what happened next. There was a new singer called Ronnie James Dio who joined the band, and that became the version of Black Sabbath that recorded Heaven and Hell in 1980. I should point out, I do love the Ronnie James Dio era of Black Sabbath. The lyrics are a bit tits and dragons, to quote Ian McShane, but that in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a slight change, actually. And a singer should always sing what he believes in. And then the second album recorded with Ronnie is Mob Rules. And there are 2 different expanded editions of Mob Rules, by the way. There is this version, which came out in 2021. That features live in Portland in 1982, some tracks from Hammersmith, and some bonus tracks and some B-sides. And there's this version, which is probably more definitive, recorded in 2010, that features material recorded live at the Hammersmith Odeon, also known as the Hammersmith Apollo. And I think the Hammersmith Odeon show is available in a slightly different form, because multiple shows were recorded on Live Evil. And there are 2 versions of Live Evil. There's a 1-disc and a 2-disc. The 2-disc doesn't actually have, I think, any extra songs on it. The 2-disc just has extra between some banter, tuning up and general faffing around. I tuned out of the band, and so I'm not a fan of anything that they did after Mob Rules for a while, on the grounds that I'm not a huge fan of things that Ian Gillan, Glenn Hughes. The Tony Martin stuff is okay, but there is a time when Tony Iommi becomes the last man standing, and that in itself is a little odd, because you then kind of go, who actually is Black Sabbath? The answer is, to my mind, it became a Tony Iommi solo band as opposed to Black Sabbath, which is something that I think Tony kind of realised as well. Dehumanizer from 1992. Ronnie James Dio back in the band, Geezer's in the band, Tony's in the band. I think that's Vinny on drums, or it might be Calm in a Piece, I'm not sure. And that is a reunion of the Mob Rules era, I believe. Before we got to the actual reunion, late 1996, rumours were afoot that Ozzy, Bill, Tony and Geezer were going to work together and play some shows at the Birmingham NEC. Immortalised on this reunion, the 1997 live album, the first official full-length Black Sabbath concert recording by the classic 4 members, and even there, Bill's not on the front, which kind of makes me feel that he's a little bit relegated to the sidelines. I'll talk about that shortly. So these are recorded at 2 shows at the Birmingham NEC in 1997. I could have gone. I decided not to. I'm still not a huge fan of Black Sabbath. I kind of regret that. I kind of don't. But I have the CD and the LP, and that's good news. And there were 2 new studio tracks, Psycho Man and Selling My Soul. I think Psycho Man features Bill on drums. Selling My Soul has a drum machine. Who on earth thinks that built Black Sabbath are better with a drum machine? Not me. I'll put it that way. And then for a period of time, the Aussie-fronted Black Sabbath became a live draw. They performed a new song called Scary Dreams in 2001 that they didn't record. And instead, they kind of followed up Reunion with the 1999 DVD and VHS, The Last Supper, recorded on the American shows in 1999. And having watched this, I've got to say this is atrocious, because the music, which is what we're all here for, is interrupted by pointless interviews with Henry Rollins. Now, I know Henry loves Black Sabbath, and he's spoken about that frequently on his spoken word albums. But if you buy a Black Sabbath live DVD, that's what you want to have, isn't it? You don't want to have suddenly interviews with, I don't know, the wanker from Pantera. I'll let you decide which wanker from Pantera that is. The band toured again up to 2005. One of their last shows was at the Donington Download Festival, which is on this bootleg DVD, After Forever. It's also on YouTube. And that's worth watching and getting. So incidentally, this is the first full-length Black Sabbath show, which I have on DVD, that isn't interrupted with bullshit interviews, which for a band that had been going at that point 38 years is pretty surprising. And after that, Black Sabbath decided to release a compilation album reflecting upon the Dio years called Black Sabbath, the Dio Years. And this features, I think, 3 new recordings: The Devil Cried, Shadow of the Wind, and Ear in the Wall, which are quite good. But there's an element of trying to capture something that's a little bit been and gone. And the Mob Rules era of the band reunited for the Live in New York Radio City Music Hall 2007 release. This is under the band name of Heaven and Hell. When Ozzy rejoined the band, Tony and Ozzy got joint ownership of the band named Black Sabbath. Tony couldn't call himself Black Sabbath and just go out and tour with whomever he wanted, which is what he'd been doing previously. And so therefore, this band, although they're called Heaven and Hell, is the lineup of Black Sabbath that played historically. Playing those songs in 2007, an important artifact to have, because it gave both the Ozzy era of the band and the Dio era of the band their respective kind of send-offs. This was followed up in 2009 by a studio album by Heaven and Hell called The Devil You Know, which is sadly overlooked, I think, when most people think about Black Sabbath. It's a Black Sabbath album in all but name, by the way. So if you're a Black Sabbath fan, you probably need to get the Heaven and Hell album. And then, of course, Black Sabbath announced another reunion, this time without Bill on drums. And Bill is and was a phenomenal drummer, very underrated. And having another drummer, to me, just never felt quite right. And as I understand it, contractually, Bill said he was given a contract that was unsignable. But realistically, what that probably meant was he would sign away his rights to Black Sabbath, take a pay cut, and then have a stunt double in to replace him as soon as he felt slightly dicky. Basically, doing a Michael Anthony, because Michael Anthony was given an opportunity to play bass for Van Halen in 2004, but it involved him taking a pay cut and signing away his rights to the name Van Halen, which he took, and therefore suddenly found himself ousted from the band. It's the kind of bullshit egotistical move that you have from bands where one member of the band or 2 members of the band get an idea that they're more important than another member of the band. And the answer is, no, they fucking aren't, unless you're Bez. Hang on. I don't know who rang me, but I'm not taking that phone call. Well, that was weird, wasn't it? The next thing that happened is that the band played live with a new drummer, Tommy Cleoflutus, I believe, who was from Ozzy's solo band. And they recorded a studio album with Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine on drums. The album is called 13. Here is one of the many, many editions of the album in one of those weird covers. 13 as an album is pretty damn good, actually. But, and there is a but, is that it is formatted to heck, which means there are 3 studio recordings on most versions of the CD, a double CD, which are Methodemic, Peace of Mind and Pariah. And Methodemic was played live by the band, by the way, that aren't on the album. And there's a 4th track, Naivety in Black, that isn't on the album either. It was only available if you bought the CD from Target or iTunes. That shit is bullshit, by the way. And to follow up swiftly upon the release of 13 came Black Sabbath, Gathered in Their Masses, sell-through DVD of the band, I think, in Melbourne at the Rod Laver Arena in 2013, performing a number of songs from their back catalogue and some songs from 13 as well. It's pretty good, isn't it? It's very professional. Black Sabbath had become very professional. And having seen their last performance with Bill for 20 years at Alexandra Palace in 2005, it didn't feel quite right having somebody else in the band. The last studio recordings by Black Sabbath were released in 2016. Here is an unofficial Russian CD of it. It was called The End, an EP that was 47 minutes long, longer than Technical Ecstasy, by the way, kids. It features 4 new tracks: Season of the Dead, Cry All Night, Take Me Home and Isolated Man, and then 4 live tracks as well. And these were sold at the merch stall on the 2016 and 17 The End tour, the last Black Sabbath tour. The last show of the last Black Sabbath tour took place at Birmingham on the 4th of February 2017, released as a CD, DVD, Blu-ray and multi-disc vinyl set, box set, and it's good, really good, but you can see that the band are starting to reach the end of their physical capacity. So with that in mind, if you are a fan of the band and you want to own Black Sabbath on CD, sure, this is probably the most affordable version to get unless you pick up the individual releases. If you want to get Black Sabbath on vinyl, by the way, this is the one to get. And primarily I say because it's affordable. This is the Hand of Doom vinyl box set, which in January was £108 for 8 studio albums on picture disc from Amazon. And depending upon when it sits in the deals, you can get it for about that price still. This is 8 picture discs. And I'd like to point out, picture discs have got a heck of a lot better than they used to. Because picture discs used to be really loud, crunchy bits of novelty vinyl that you had, so that, you know, they could sell an extra copy of the single on picture disc in a shaped thingy. But no, the vinyl here is based upon, I think, the 2009 Masters. It's relatively quiet. Listening to these, you'll have no idea that you're not listening to standard black vinyl. And of course, everybody loves a picture disc. So I waited, bided my time, and got this edition of the vinyl box set. Sure, I actually did hear somebody say, I've got that on vinyl at 9 Inch Nails a few weeks ago. And I was like, that's not going to impress anyone. But yes, I like vinyl, I like CD. Ultimately, this is all a music delivery system. And that's what it's meant to do, is that it's meant to move you. It's meant to make you feel things. And if it doesn't do that, it doesn't mean anything. So how do I feel about Ozzy's death? Well, Ozzy clearly had Parkinson's. He was clearly reaching the end of his physical abilities. He had a fitting living funeral less than 3 weeks ago in Birmingham. And I think possibly that's the best thing that he could have ever done, really, is to be able to look his audience in the eye one last time and wish them good night, good luck, and thank them before telling them to go fucking crazy, before they did Crazy Train. I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan. Solo Ozzy, as you've probably worked out, not so much. But ultimately, one of Birmingham's favourite sons left a fantastic legacy. Because what was left is the records. When you think about bands that don't make records anymore, when Axl Rose dies, people are just going to go, yeah, he gave up in 2008. Didn't release an album afterwards. Or Kraftwerk, someone's going to go, yeah, when he got to 50, he just stopped. And you kind of go, that's the only thing, really. You're not going to be able to get to experience what would music have been like for Guns N' Roses or Kraftwerk as they got to 80. What would their vision of the world have been? And the answer is, you have no idea. Because I think an artist that is truly great continues in their creativity until their dying days. Because their music and art is the way in which people make sense of the world. It's the way in which people make sense of the reality that exists around them. It's the way that they interpret the reality and put their perspective upon it to us. And if you stop 30 or 40 years before you die, unless you've got a good, compelling financial reason, if you just dry up, that is such a great shame, both for you as an artist and for your fans, because I love new music, despite the fact I've got so much of the old stuff here. And rightly or wrongly, Ozzy made records pretty much right through to the end. I think his last album came out 2 years before he died. And that in itself is one hell of an achievement. And that's something to aspire to. He may have been, at least certainly when I first saw him in Decline of Western Civilization, he may have been a metal clown. But also, he had integrity, he had creativity, he walked it like he talked it, and good God, the world needs more people like that, doesn't it? And with that, I guess I saw him 4 times. That's better than I feared. Not as many as I probably could have done, but it could have been a heck of a lot worse. Seeing him 4 times is better than not ever seeing him. And if nothing else, we'll always have the records, the ridiculous anecdotes, and we'll always have a headless bat somewhere on stage, somewhere. So as the not the single Hard Road, which by the way, purple is colour, worth remembering. I suppose probably the best way to describe it, and the first thought that came to my mind when I heard that Ozzy had died was this: never say die. It is a change of cosmic address. When we die, we don't cease to exist. We don't pop out of existence. We live on, and we live on in many, many ways. One, through the way that we made people feel. Secondly, through the tendrils and actions that we have through the course of our lives. And thirdly, it is the height of arrogance for humans to think that the only things that we can see and the only things that are real are the things that we can feel, we can touch, and we can hear. There is more, so much more than that. And we are all we are is dust in the wind, dude, as Bill and Ted said. But more correctly, our souls are energy. They transform. As Edgar Froese say, we move to a new cosmic address. The next stage, then, is what happens after that. And we will continue in some form. And with these records, Ozzy will be here, even if he isn't here. And I think that it's important to know that no matter what happens, everything that we do leaves a footprint upon the earth of some size, and we should tread carefully. Right. Stay beautiful. Take care of yourselves and each other. Be excellent to each other, and I will see you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.